Welcome in. It is Big Ten today, the first day of the rest of our lives, or at least the rest of our calendar year. I mean, I don't want to go into hyperbole too much here early on in the day, but it is football from now until January. Dave Revson and Jake Butt with you. You ready to go?
I'm ready to go, man. And this is so fun because it's true in all sports, but for me, it was my experience in football you work year round, right? And you just get such limited opportunities to go out there and put it on tape. And we have a saying in football, you are what you put on tape. It's all speculation. Everyone enters the season thinking they have a good shot. We get to find out a lot about these teams this weekend.
The final day of speculation. Let's have it commence, and it will with our big story, and it is, of course, Huskers and Gophers tonight. For Nebraska, it is the debut of head coach Matt Rhule trying to reverse the Huskers' struggles. 6 straight losing seasons, their longest streak in more than 70 years. Minnesota coming off a 9-win season. PJ Fleck and company harboring Big Ten West title hopes, but battling some inexperience at key spots and a brutal schedule. Both teams ready to go.
Nebraska's going to be a really good opponent, really good football team. You know, bringing in Matt Rhule, who I've known for a very long time.
It's a kind of a baptism by fire, but I think it's what we need. I think it's going to be good for our guys to go through that, to go up to Minnesota, to play at night on the road, national TV.
We know that it's going to be a heck of a matchup.
I like starting early, especially against Minnesota. That'll be a great game.
It's good to be at home in front of our fan base. Nebraska always travels very well. They always got a great team.
Getting that first win straight out the gate is going to be really important for us.
Everything's on the line game one, so we're excited for it. It's going to be a good challenge. Minnesota's a solid team.
Start fast. Let's go. Let's jump right into it.
We are going to heed that advice. We're going to jump right into it. Let's start with PJ Fleck and the Gophers. What do you believe is at stake for Minnesota tonight?
Frankly, I think, Dave, everything's at stake. And it's the context of where we're at as a league and where the Big Ten is headed, right? I mean, we know one thing for sure is that one team from the West gets a chance to go to Indy and compete for a Big Ten title this year. That's not going to be the case next year as we do away with divisions, and it doesn't stop there. You're adding 4 new big-time brands. So the road to competing for a conference title is only going to get more challenging. With that in mind, Minnesota and PJ Fleck, I think he believes this team can do it. Now's the time. Now's the time to go do it, and you get to prove that against an excellent opponent with a lot of great storylines in Nebraska and Matt Rhule.
I'm with you 100%. I think this is an enormous game for Minnesota. It's an enormous year because it is probably their best chance to play in the Big Ten championship game. It's not saying they can't do it 3 years from now or 5 years from now or next year, but the road is a lot harder. I think the challenge for me is you got Michigan and Ohio State on the crossover schedule. So this is a game you cannot afford to drop unless you're going to pull some Titanic upsets along the way.
There's a saying, too, and those games are important, but specifically the West, right? There's a saying we had in the NFL that it was the first time I heard it. It made so much sense. It's very simple, but division games count as double because it's your win and their loss. This will only be one game, but you're starting out for the winner. You got a little bit of a buffer. You're out ahead of them. For the loser, now you're fighting uphill. So with that in mind, and for the context you just provided, the crossover games that Minnesota has to play, the urgency has to be here tonight on Thursday night.
Minnesota's just 1-5 in conference home openers under PJ Fleck. We'll see if they can reverse that trend against the Huskers. For Nebraska, it seems to me, and I'm interested whether you agree, I don't think there is nearly as much at stake for them unless they play really poorly. My take on it is they've got to come out and play well. They need to show that they're better. They need to show that they're well organized. I don't believe the results of the game matters nearly as much for them. Do you agree? Or now, clearly, you can jumpstart things if you win. But what's your sense of what's at stake for them?
I think you're right. And it leads into something of the whole conversation about Matt Rhule is about his history of turning around programs. And he's done that at Temple. He's done it at Baylor. But it's usually been on a longer timeline. So no one's sitting here expecting Nebraska to be the team to come out of the West. They're saying, hey, by year 2, by year 3, Matt Rhule will get this thing going. But what's at stake is for the guys in the locker room. Because Matt Rhule looked at his veteran, senior-heavy team and said just that. Hey, guys, I know I can turn around the program. I have a history of doing it. But you're seniors. If we want to turn this around quicker, it's going to be on you guys. So the stakes are for those guys in the locker room. They don't want to hear about next year. The guys that this will be the last chance, the last year that you play football for some guys. They don't want to hear about the timeline. The stakes are right now.
Agree. And again, like if they win, man, it's huge, especially against a team that has kind of had their number here. I mean, Minnesota has dominated Nebraska in recent years. And so not only to win, but to win a battle against a quasi-rival here and a team that's had your number, it would send a message right away that, hey, it's going to be different now under that rule. Scott Frost era is behind us. All this struggle that we've had, certainly for the last 6 years, but I think you can make an argument really in their history for the last 20 or so based on where things had been prior to that era. I think, again, there's tons to gain tonight. I don't think you have a lot to lose unless you just really play poorly.
The history, it factors into a sense, but again, I think Nebraska fans and certainly Matt Rule and the guys in the locker room, they're aware of the history, but they're ready to turn the page on this. And even just watching the way Nebraska competed in their spring game and watching some of their storylines throughout the offseason, these guys aren't worried about the past. They're worried about starting to get this thing turned around and headed in the right direction right now. And if we do talk about history, Dave, the record's been bad, but the context provides a little bit different story. They've lost so many games within one score. They've been right there. And then you look at all the self-inflicted wounds, being one of the worst teams in terms of turnovers throughout the season. That matters. So, yeah, go out there, compete. You certainly don't want to get run off the field. I don't expect that to happen. But limit some of those self-inflicted wounds. Start to say, hey, we are a new team. This is your chance to put it on tape.
The talent has been better than the records here the last few years. It has not been a team completely devoid of talent, and yet you wouldn't know it from the wins and the losses. So let's dive into the X's and O's a little bit. What's the biggest thing that you're going to be watching first from Minnesota's point of view?
So, Minnesota's replacing the significant part of your offense in running back Mo Ibrahim. So we're all wondering, are they still going to be as run heavy as they were last year? And PJ kind of answered that in some of his press conferences throughout the week. He said, we are who we are. We're going to do what we do, which is run the football. Okay, we get to find out about the new running back in Sean Tyler. We get to see if Callie McManus can do some special things running the football. We get to see how the offensive line gets to run against a Big Ten West defense. So I think the key there is that if that's who you're going to be, this is a great benchmark. This is a great test. You will know exactly your capability on running the football by the time this night, by Friday morning tomorrow. I do think a piece of this is, of course I'm a tight end, so I'm always going to say this, but Brevin Spanford is the most experienced, proven tight end in our league right now. And he's had production throughout his career. To me, he's their best weapon. So if you're going to run the football, I think you have to get him 6 to 8, upwards of 10 targets a game. He's just that good. He's 6'7". There's no safety that can match up physically with him. It's that complementary football. Establish the run, PJ, sure. But he needs to have 60 catches this year. He needs to have 600 yards, and he needs to have 6, 7, 8 touchdowns on the season too.
And part of that with a tight end, although he can be explosive, is moving the football methodically, right?
Yeah.
It's a way to do it. It can even be, in some senses, an extension of that run game. And that's where Minnesota's at their best. Time of possession. They were third in the nation last year. In their wins, they possessed the ball for more than 37 minutes per game. In their losses, it was less than 29 minutes per game. So if they can hold on to the football, move it along with Tyler, with Spanford, that's their formula to win. What about from Nebraska? Biggest key you'll be watching for them?
Well, the flip side's true. If we know Minnesota's going to run the football, and we know we're talking Big Ten West football, which means everyone's going to run the football, for Nebraska, it's going to be on that front seven and that defensive line, linebackers. This is your chance to stop the run, right? I think this game is won and lost in the trenches. And for Matt Rule, just even going back to the spring game, there was a physical brand of football, but that's the offseason. You are what you put on tape. It's a theme I've said a couple times now here throughout the show. But to play this opening game, a divisional game in the Big Ten West, you want to put that on tape. It's like you start the snowball rolling down the hill. It all starts right here for that defense to go out there, understanding Minnesota wants to run the football and saying, no, not on us. We're not going to do that. And sending a message to everyone else on your schedule. Don't look at us. Don't watch film from last year. This is who we are this year.
And you look at what Minnesota has done against Nebraska in this 4-game winning streak. They've run the ball. I mean, it's been nearly 209 yards per game on average in those 4 games. So that's a huge part of it. I think in the build-up to talking about Nebraska's defense this year and where it has to be better, we've talked about Tony White and that 3-3-5 defense that he brings. You know, when I think of 5 defensive backs, I think a lot of us think of that in terms of combating the modern offense, which is throwing the ball all over the field. How well equipped is a 3-3-5 to stop a run game?
What you just said is what cost Michigan against TCU last year, right? It's like you think stop the run, you're getting a bear front, a 5-2, a 6-1. You're bringing in bigger bodies, and that certainly makes sense to some level. But if you think about the schemes and how you want to run the ball, a good running game involves double teams and identifying. All the offensive line has to be on the same page. We're double teaming here, you're double teaming to the next guy. It's communicative. When it's 3-3-5, those smaller bodies can come into the box, and it can confuse and disrupt some of these double teams. So you have trouble all of a sudden identifying and getting on the same page as one unit. That's how you get free bodies in the backfield, and then it's on those free bodies to make the plays. So I think it's more about identification and what you can do to disguise blitzes and run blitzes than it is about imposing your will from a run defense standpoint.
Statistically, they were not good in that category last year. I mentioned Minnesota ran all over them. They weren't the only ones. 13th in the Big Ten in rush defense a season ago for the Huskers. But again, a new year, a new scheme. We will find out tonight whether it's a new story.